Are the sanctions imposed by the FIA on Lewis Hamilton really fair? Or are we facing a scandalous case of double standards that could break the 2025 championship from within? The 2025 São Paulo Grand Prix, held at the legendary Interlagos circuit, was to be a stage of redemption for Ferrari and its brand new signing, Lewis Hamilton. Instead, it became the epicenter of a controversy that is threatening to set the entire Formula One season on fire. The atmosphere was already charged before the cars hit the asphalt, but what happened throughout the weekend exceeded any prediction. From the confusion in the qualifying sessions to referee decisions that continue to generate debate today, Brazil 2025 marked a turning point not only for Hamilton, but for the entire championship. It all started on Friday during qualifying for the sprint race. At a crucial moment in the session, Charles Leclerc lost control of his SF25 at turn 10, just as his teammate Hamilton was on the fastest lap. Leclerc's spin generated a double yellow flag. Here the first act of the drama took place. Hamilton crossed the sector just as the warning panel illuminated, and according to his own statements, the visual signal only appeared for a fraction of a second, which did not allow him to react properly. The Briton explained that he was focused on the braking point, with his vision towards the curve and not on the side panel. However, the stewards, upon analyzing the telemetry, determined that he had not reduced the speed as required by the regulations in those conditions. Although they recognized extenuating circumstances such as the viewing angle and the brief moment in which the signal was activated, they decided to issue a formal warning. And although this decision did not alter his position on the sprint grid, it set an uncomfortable precedent. The perception that even with evidence in favor, the FIA chooses to sanction. That was just the beginning. On Sunday in the main race, everything fell apart for Ferrari. Hamilton, after having qualified in a disappointing 13th position due to lack of grip and unbalanced car, was involved in a chaotic start. In the first corner, a contact with Carlos Sainz caused him to drop to 17th position. Just a few laps later, on the main straight, the most controversial moment of the day occurred. An incident with Franco Colapinto, the young Argentine from Alpine. Hamilton, in the middle of an overtaking maneuver, collided with the Alpine, causing significant damage to the front wing and floor of his Ferrari. The effect was immediate. The SF25 lost all of its forward downforce. Driving became impossible. The car bounced, skidded, and was unable to keep up. Despite the obvious damage, it took just minutes for the FIA to announce a 5-second penalty against Hamilton, considering him totally responsible for the touch. This not only penalized his career, which was already sentenced, but also added a new penalty point to his super license. And this is where the Real storm begins to brew. That point was added to the two already existing from Zandvoort, where Hamilton was penalized for not reducing enough in another yellow flag area and for an entry into the pit lane considered too fast. With 3 points on his license, the most successful driver in F1 history enters a risk zone. It is not on the verge of a suspension since the limit is 12 and 12 months, but this system acts like a sword of Damocles. Every error, no matter how minor, becomes a threat of exclusion. What is worrying is not only the sum of sanctions but the criteria with which they are imposed. Why, with extenuating circumstances and damage received, is the affected pilot punished so harshly? Is it a question of precedent, of sending a message, or are we facing a trend that leans according to the name on the helmet? Ferrari, meanwhile, saw its career doubly ruined. Charles Leclerc also retired due to a hydraulic failure, and the team ended Sunday without points. For a team that fights every point with McLaren and Mercedes, the Brazilian GP was devastating. But beyond the sporting aspect, there was a latent feeling. Something is not working well in the relationship between the FIA and certain teams or drivers. This storm is not an isolated event. It is the result of a system that is beginning to show cracks under the pressure of the championship. Stewardship, last-minute decisions, and the use of the super license system as a punitive rather than preventive tool is causing a fracture in trust. And when the protagonists on the track feel that the rules of the game change depending on who is involved, the integrity of the entire championship comes into question. When a driver like Lewis Hamilton, with 7 world championships behind him and 2 decades of experience in the top category of motorsport, decides to speak without filters on the team radio, the world of Formula One listens. And when that explosion occurs in the middle of a Grand Prix that was already involved in controversies and sanctions, his words become an alarm signal for the entire category. During the 2025 Brazilian Grand Prix race, with the Ferrari injured due to the damage suffered after the incident with Franco Colapinto, Hamilton could barely stay on the track. His car, affected on the flat bottom and without front aerodynamic load, Was a broken car, out of control, unable to fight for points. And then the message came over the radio. Riccardo Adami, his engineer, informed him of the 5-second penalty. Hamilton, completely frustrated, responded with a phrase that echoed throughout the paddock. "These guys are a joke. A complete joke." That reaction, raw and direct, was not just the expression of an angry pilot. It was the manifestation of an accumulated tension that had been growing since the first races of the year. The tone was neither theatrical nor exaggerated, it was visceral. It reflected the perception of injustice, of a regulation that seems to be reinterpreted race after race, according to the driver involved. Hamilton is no stranger to sanctions. He has faced them throughout his career, some deserved, others highly debated. But what makes this statement something different is the context. He is racing for Ferrari in his second Grand Prix as a prancing horse driver, and his criticism no longer only affects his personal image, but also that of his team. It is dragging Ferrari into the center of an institutional dispute with the FIA. A dispute that not all teams are willing to hold in public. And this is where Frédéric Vasseur, the Ferrari team director, comes in. A character who, until now, had opted for diplomacy, for balance, for not provoking unnecessary public confrontations with the stewards or the race management. But Brazil was the turning point. Vasseur, in subsequent statements, not only defended his driver, but also openly questioned the management of the arbitration decisions in recent times. That he recalled the episode in Mexico, where Hamilton was penalized 10 seconds after going off the track in a battle with Verstappen. That penalty, which cost him what could have been his first podium with Ferrari, was, in Vasseur's words, very, very harsh and not very well handled. Although he referred to the FIA with caution, his message was clear. There are glaring inconsistencies, and those inconsistencies are directly impacting the team's results. What makes this critique powerful is not just its content, but its timing. Ferrari has once again been a protagonist in the championship, and Vasseur knows that he cannot allow refereeing decisions to erode that momentum. Even more so when those decisions seem to disproportionately affect one of their star drivers. The situation takes on an even greater dimension if we consider that this atmosphere of discontent with the stewards is not exclusive to Ferrari. Other teams have also privately noted that there is a lack of uniformity in penalty criteria, which makes Ferrari the spokesperson for a general discomfort. And that position, far from weakening it, can reinforce its political role in future decisions in Formula One. From the race in Zandvoort to the recent Brazilian Grand Prix, a disturbing pattern has been woven. The regulations are applied, but with nuances that change depending on the protagonist. In the Netherlands, Lewis Hamilton was penalized for not slowing down enough under double yellow flags. So far, nothing unusual. But the controversy arose when other pilots, involved in similar or even more dangerous maneuvers, did not receive any sanction. The problem is not that it is sanctioned. The real conflict appears when the same action, under the same conditions, generates different consequences depending on the name of the driver or the team to which he belongs. The situation worsened in Mexico, where Hamilton was given a 10-second penalty for going off track and supposedly gaining a lasting advantage by rejoining on the grass. A maneuver that, in visual analysis, was more of an emergency correction than a strategy to gain position. What inflamed tempers was not only the sanction itself, but the fact that in that same race, Max Verstappen performed similarly aggressive maneuvers without receiving punishment. This double standard, this perception of favoritism or at least arbitrariness is what is eroding the credibility of the commissioners. And here one of the most controversial mechanisms of the current regulations comes into play, the penalty point system in the super license. This tool, originally designed to deter dangerous and repetitive behavior, is beginning to behave like a silent weapon, a countdown that can decide a championship. Each point is accumulated over 12 months, and reaching 12 means an automatic suspension for one race. This threshold, which in theory should have been unattainable for a disciplined pilot, has become a latent threat for even the most experienced. In the case of Hamilton, he already accumulates 3 points. 2 of them from Zandvoort, 1 more added after the collision with Colapinto in Interlagos. What is alarming here is not the number itself, but the nature of the incidents for which he is punished. None were deliberate. None manifestly jeopardized safety. And yet, the system counts them with the same weight as if they were reckless or repeat maneuvers. Are we then facing a fair tool or a poorly calibrated mechanism that does not distinguish between errors in judgment and unsportsmanlike conduct? Formula One, more than a competition between machines at the limit of engineering, is a continuous narrative of power, pressure, and precision. Each team, each driver, and each decision made from race control is part of a delicate balance. But that balance is at risk today. What happened to Lewis Hamilton in Brazil is not just another episode of a frustrated driver or a disgruntled team. It is the reflection of a question that is beginning to grow increasingly louder in the paddock, in the media, and among fans. Is the FIA really up to the challenge of running modern F1? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.